Okay, class, in this lab, we're going to set up storage pools. So I'm going to go to File, Storage Pools. Some books actually call this storage spaces, but in any case, it's the same thing. So I'm going to right click the Start menu, go to Disk Management. On disk 1, 2, and 3, I've deleted all the partitions that are on there, so we have unallocated spaces. They're online and initialized, but they don't need to be. The whole purpose of storage pools is to disassociate your physical size of your disk with the size of the disk that you actually need. Right now, I have 3 physical hard disks, each 20 gigs. In reality, you're probably going to have a lot bigger hard disk. I know these are virtual hard disks, but I'm just going to pretend that these are physical disks. So right now I have 3 physical disks, 20 gigs each, but let's say I need 1 disk of 60 gigs or 1 disk of 40 gigs, or let's say I need 1 disk that's 30 gigs. So with storage pools, you can disassociate the physical size of the disk with the actual size that you need. So what I'm going to do is add all 3 disks to a new storage pool. So I've highlighted all of them, choose next. I'm going to call this storage pool 01. And it's going to be on this server. And by default, all 3 disks are chosen. If you don't want to add one, you can just unselect it. Click next, then create. Then close. Now I've added all 3 disks to the storage pool. If I highlight it, I can see that those 3 disks are part of that storage pool. I'm going to go back to disk management. Once you've done that, the disk will no longer be, you will no longer be able to manage them through disk management. You have to use storage pools to manage them. So now that I have a storage pool, I can create disk whatever size that I want from that storage pool. So I'm going to go to Task, a new virtual hard disk. This lab really doesn't cover what you can do with those disks, just that, how to create them. Again, the purpose of this is to disassociate the physical disk that you have with the disk that you need. It's kind of hard to visualize that because I'm using such small disk. But if I had 64 terabytes of disk space, I can group them all into one storage pool and then divvy them out however I need them. So I'm going to choose my storage pool, click OK. Now I'm going to call the first disk virtual disk 01. Click next. I'm going to type this out so you can see what I'm talking about. JBOD, just a bunch of disk. So basically, if you have this box of disk, we call that a JBOD, just a bunch of disk, and then you hook those up to a computer or a server somewhere, and then you're able to access those disks as if they're a local disk, and you can do whatever you want with them. So when they're referring to enclosure, they're talking about that just a bunch of disk enclosure, JBOD. And then if that has any intelligence to it, you can integrate that intelligence into storage pools. So if a disk goes down or something, it'll be aware of it, and then storage pools will be aware of it. Click next. My case, I don't have that box, so I can't, this is grayed out. Now I can create 3 types of disk. a striped, a mirror, and a RAID 5. So this will be RAID 0, RAID 1, or RAID 5. So if I say a simple disk, it's going to be striped across all three of those physical disks, or as many as it needs. So I'm going to click Next, and I can make it a fixed size or a thin size. This will increase as needed. This, if I say I want a 30 gig disk, it'll create a 30 gig disk. And it'll use 30 gigs of that disk space that I have right now. I'm going to create a 30 gig disk. Then create. Now, as soon as I click close, it's going to launch the wizard to format this disk. I'm going to click Next. There's my hard disk. It's on that storage pool. This is my virtual hard disk on that storage pool. And I'm going to create a 15 gig partition. Assign a drive letter of D, format it NTFS. Then create. Then close. And I just want to point something else out. I can create a new virtual disk here. But once I create a disk, that virtual hard disk is now inside of disk management. Not the physical disk, the new virtual disk that I've created. So I've created one 15 gig partition automatically. If I wanted to, I can create another 15 gig partition. So I created one 30 gig virtual hard disk and created two partitions on it. And these partitions will all depend on the needs that you're trying to satisfy. So I'm going to close this. Sorry, I'm going to go to this PC, and I can see that I have two additional partitions. And I still have some space left in my storage pool. My storage pool has 60 gigs available. I've only created a 30 gig hard disk from that. On the 30 gig hard disk, I created two partitions. So now I'm going to, guys, it's kind of backwards. You start here, go counterclockwise, you add your disk to a storage pool, you have your storage pool, and then you create virtual hard disks from that. If I put more physical disk on this machine, I could then add them to the storage pool without affecting anything else. Once I add more disk, I'll have more space in the storage pool, then I can create more virtual hard disks from that. So right now I'm going to create another virtual hard disk. I have 27 gigs still free. I was rounding up to 60 gigs based on the capacity. A little bit of your disk is used every time you create add it to a storage pool. I'm going to call this virtual disk 02. I don't have an enclosure. And I can create a mirror. If I did a disk, I would need at least 3 physical disks. If I did a mirror, I need at least 2 physical disks. 3 if you're using it in a cluster. We'll get into that later. Click Next, fix size. The biggest disk I can create with a mirror is 12 gigs. The reason being is, remember, with mirrors we lose 50% of the capacity because the data is written twice. So I'm just going to go with the maximum size. Click Next. Create. Now when it creates that mirror, it's going to make sure that the copy is on a physical hard disk, a different physical hard disk. So it's not going to create a mirror. I'm going to press cancel. Guys, it created the mirror. I don't want to format it here. I want to show you how to format it in disk management. So when it creates that mirror, it makes sure it uses 2 physical hard disks. So if you lose one hard disk, you haven't lost your mirror. If they put both mirrored virtual disks on the same physical disk and you lost that physical disk, there's no point in having a mirror. So guys, I could have let the wizard automatically format it, but I'm going to go into disk management. I'm going to scroll down. That's my mirrored disk. It only looks like one physical disk, but in reality, it's using 24 gigs here. So my computer will see it only as one disk, but in reality, it's a mirror. So I can format it here, new simple volume. And so now I have two striped partitions. Excuse me, this is a striped disk with 2 partitions. And here is a mirrored disk with 1 partition on it. It's a little bit different than what we did before, where we created, had 2 disks and we created a partition on each disk. Here it's mirroring the disk, not the partitions. And here these are striped across multiple disks, not one physical disk. The partitions aren't striped. The virtual disk that these partitions are made on is striped. These partitions aren't striped. These partitions aren't mirrored. The disk that it's made on is mirrored. So I'm going to delete these virtual hard disks just so I can show you how to do a RAID 5. This will free up some space. I have to delete the partitions before I can do it, because it's a mirror. No, the other disk was the mirror deleted fine. It's the other disk with 2 partitions didn't get deleted. Okay. So now I want to delete that disk. Let me try to refresh this. Yeah, I guess I just had to refresh it after I deleted the volumes. Okay, so now I'm back to a blank storage pool that has 3 hard disks, 60 gigs available. So this time I'm going to create a RAID 5. I'm going to call this virtual disk 01. Now I'm going to do a parity. It's going to stripe everything across all physical disk, and it's going to do a parity bit, which is RAID 5. RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5. It's going to be fixed. And it's saying that the maximum size I can have, because I'll lose a third of the space, because I only have 3 physical disks, is 36 gigs. Click Next, then Create. I'm going to go back and do that again. For some reason, I think this is calculating the disk size wrong. I'm going to drop down to 29 gigs. I'm going to do a parity. Actually, I'm going to drop down to 25 gigs. I'm not sure why it's not allowing me to do this. I think that because these aren't real disks, these are virtual hard disks on ACE-IT. It's not really, there's some sort of hard HAL layer failure that's going on. If we were in the classroom, this would be no problem. I'm not sure why it's really not working. Let me try to go all the way down to 18 gigs. By going down to 18 gigs, I'm making sure that it can span it across multiple volumes. No. Let me go down to 15 gigs. Okay, guys, so this lab can't be done on ACE-IT, but you get the gist of it. 3 different disk types, RAID 0, RAID 1, and RAID 5, using storage pools. And also disassociating the physical size of your disk with the size of the disk that you need. A lot of students are confused over this lab because we don't really create the disk and use them for anything. Try to not worry about the purpose of what the disks are for, just that we need some disk for some specific purpose, and at that point, this is how we create them. Okay, that's it for this lab. Thank you.